It started with an envelope, a pale blue one, left slightly ajar on the edge of my brother's desk, marked with a law firm's insignia I didn't recognize. I hadn't meant to snoop. I was just dropping off some old family photos our mother had asked me to sort through. But something about the thick paper and the embossed stamp drew me in, like a door half open that dared you to peek inside. Inside was a letter, formal, clinical. It laid out steps to file for an emergency psychiatric evaluation under Article 18.4 of the Civil Code. The name in bold at the top? Mine. At first, I assumed it was a draft, a mistake, maybe something unrelated. But stapled to it were printouts of text messages. My own messages, cherry-picked and rearranged to make me sound erratic, paranoid, even dangerous. Screenshots of emails I'd sent at 2 a.m. about Dad's estate. A voice memo I didn't even know existed, taken during one of our arguments where I raised my voice just a little too much. The implication was chilling. My brother, Daniel, was preparing to have me declared mentally unfit. And suddenly, everything clicked. The way he'd started calling more often, asking strangely specific questions about how I was sleeping. The surprise visit from a friend of his just checking in. The recent push to move Dad into a care facility when I'd been advocating for in-home care. The hurried way Daniel had taken control of the finances when Dad's memory started fading. And now he was trying to take the apartment, our childhood home. Or maybe it wasn't about the apartment at all. Maybe it was about control. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I didn't feel crazy at all. I didn't wait. I drove straight to Daniel's apartment that night, heart hammering against my ribs like a prisoner desperate to escape. My fingers curled so tightly around the steering wheel I thought I'd snap it in half. When he opened the door, holding a bowl of pasta and surprised to see me, I held up the letter without a word. His smile faltered. "Where did you get that?" he asked, tone carefully measured. "I could ask you the same thing," I replied. "Except I already know. You're planning to have me declared unstable, using fake evidence. You've been plotting this for weeks. Months, maybe." He sighed and stepped back, gesturing for me to come in. I didn't move. "You've been acting erratic, Mira," he said, setting the bowl down. "You call at all hours. You threatened a lawyer on email. That's not true, and you know it. I know what I read, and what others have said." "Others like who? Your friend Peter? The one who asked me if I ever heard voices?" He winced ever so slightly. That was the tell. "I was worried," he insisted. "You haven't been sleeping. You're obsessed with Dad's will. You're accusing everyone of stealing." "Because you are stealing," I shouted. "You moved his accounts without telling me. You pressured him into signing over financial power of attorney." There it was, an ugly truth laid bare. He didn't deny it. Instead, he said quietly, "You couldn't handle it, Mira. After Mom died, you fell apart. You isolated yourself. Someone had to step in. Took everything I had not to slap him. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the fake concern in his eyes. Maybe it was realizing that this wasn't just betrayal, it was strategy. He was playing a long game, and I had walked right into it. So I did what I never do when I'm angry. I went silent. "I see," I said, folding the paper and slipping it into my coat pocket. "Thank you for being honest." His brow furrowed. He knew me well enough to know I wasn't done. "I'll be in touch," I added and turned to leave. And that's when I started to plan. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the floor of my apartment with the letter in front of me, the same way I used to sit with math homework in high school, staring, willing it to make sense. But this wasn't numbers. This was betrayal wrapped in legal jargon. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. Every creak sounded like a threat. Every knock on the door made my stomach twist. I'd always known Daniel and I were different. He was charming, good with people. I was the bookish one, the worrier. But I never thought he'd turn on me like this. Not like this. We'd buried a mother together. We'd sat side by side when Dad started forgetting names. We'd fought, yes, but all siblings fight. That's what I told myself. Now I wasn't sure we'd ever been on the same side. The anger came in waves, sharp, hot, all-consuming. I paced, punched a pillow, deleted then rewrote furious texts. But beneath the rage was something harder to bear. Shame. Was he right? Had I really sounded unhinged in those messages? Had my grief made me paranoid? I remembered the late-night emails, the obsessing over bank statements, the calls to our dad's old lawyer that went unanswered. Maybe I had sounded unstable. But didn't I have a right to ask questions? To protect what was ours? It felt like I was living in a house with mirrors for walls, every angle showing a different, distorted version of me. By morning, the fury had burned down to ash. I sat at the kitchen table, numb, sipping cold coffee, staring at my own reflection in the window. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just fighting Daniel. I was fighting the story he was telling about me. And if I didn't act carefully, deliberately, I wouldn't just lose the apartment. I'd lose myself in the process. I started by calling Uncle Mark. He was Dad's younger brother, the kind of man who still wore leather gloves to drive and refused to use email. We weren't close, but I knew he kept receipts, literal ones and metaphorical. More importantly, Daniel hated him. Said he was a dinosaur. That made me trust him. I didn't tell him everything over the phone. Just asked if we could meet. When I showed him the letter and the screenshots, he squinted at the papers through his bifocals, then let out a low whistle. "That's a bold move," he said, shaking his head. "You know your brother's not stupid, Mira." "I know," I said. "That's why I need someone who remembers what this family looked like before we started hiding money in trusts and whispering about diagnoses." Mark didn't say yes right away. He leaned back in his kitchen chair, took a slow sip of tea, and then asked a question I hadn't prepared for. "Do you want to fix this or win?" Stopped me cold. Part of me wanted to fix it, to call Daniel and scream until he cried and admitted he'd crossed the line. But the deeper part, the part that had been made to question her own mind, wanted him exposed. Not just stopped. Known for what he'd done. "I want proof," I said finally. "So that when this goes to court or wherever it goes, I have more than just my word." Uncle Mark gave a small nod, like a general acknowledging a new soldier. He gave me the name of a friend, a retired forensic accountant who owed him a favor. The next week was a blur of digging. I went through old emails, bank records, anything I could find, and what I found was suspicious. Transfers Daniel had made for Dad's care that ended up in shell accounts. A power of attorney signature dated a week after Dad had been diagnosed with early-stage dementia. Even a voice message from Dad himself, unsure of what he'd signed, asking Daniel why I was so upset. I started recording everything. Calls, conversations, my own thoughts, because if Daniel wanted to make me look crazy, I was going to make sure every step I took was cold, calm, and documented. And if he tried to paint me as unstable in court, I'd hold up the brush and say, "Nice try, but I brought my own canvas." It didn't take long for Daniel to realize I wasn't going to quietly disappear. 3 weeks after our confrontation, I received a cease and desist letter. Not from him directly, of course, but from his lawyer. It accused me of defamation, harassment, and attempting to undermine the mental health and legal integrity of a family member acting in fiduciary capacity. It was laughable and terrifying. I brought the letter to Uncle Mark's friend, the retired accountant Gwen. She looked it over and smirked. "This is a pressure tactic," she said. "If he had real grounds, he'd be suing already." But it still shook me. The fact that he'd gone this far, it meant he wasn't bluffing. He wanted me quiet, out of the way, maybe even institutionalized if it came to that. That night, I got a call from Peter, Daniel's friend, the one who had checked in on me weeks ago. "Mira," he said, voice low, "I probably shouldn't be calling you, but I heard something tonight." I froze. He continued, "Daniel's planning to bring up your old hospital visit, the one after your panic attack 2 years ago. He's going to use it to say you've been unstable for a long time." I felt my throat tighten. I had never told many people about that episode. It was private, personal. I'd gone to the ER because I thought I was having a heart attack, and they'd kept me overnight to monitor for anxiety. One bad night in a decade of holding everything together, and now it was ammo. I didn't respond. I didn't trust Peter either. He could have been a plant. But something in his voice, regret maybe, sounded genuine. You should know, he added. He's not scared of you, Mira. He's scared of losing. Click. And just like that, the game had changed. Daniel wasn't trying to protect anything. He was trying to win something. And if that was the case, then I needed to stop hoping for resolution and start preparing for war. So I made one final move. I sent him a message. Simple. Just 4 words. Check the mail tomorrow. Because what I had prepared for him wasn't a legal threat. It was leverage. What I sent him wasn't a lawsuit. It wasn't a threat or a demand. It was a USB drive. On it were 3 audio files, each one recorded legally in our state, where one-party consent laws applied. The first was a conversation between Daniel and Dad's nurse. Her voice shaky as she admitted she'd felt pressured to keep quiet about certain changes in medication and financial decisions. The second was a phone call Daniel had made to a mutual friend, casually describing me as fragile, probably certifiable, and mentioning how one good evaluation and she'll be out of the picture. But the third, that was the nail. It was Daniel talking to his lawyer. I hadn't recorded it myself. It came from Peter, who had apparently grown a conscience. You could hear Daniel plainly stating, once the psychiatric report clears, we can move the rest of Dad's assets under my name. She's unstable. All it takes is a single judge. I knew Daniel would play it the second he got it. I pictured him sitting alone in his condo, headphones on, listening to the walls of his plan crumble. And then silence. No email. No calls. 3 days later, I received a terse email from his lawyer, formally withdrawing the psychiatric evaluation request and citing a mutual agreement between parties. I hadn't agreed to anything. It was a retreat, a white flag dressed in legalese. But the damage was done on both sides. That night, I stood in my father's empty apartment, the one Daniel had been so eager to take. Dusty sunlight filtered through the curtains. It smelled like old books and lemon polish. I sat in his chair and realized I had won this round, but it hadn't made me feel better. I had beaten my brother, and I had proof that he'd tried to destroy me. So why did I still feel like I'd lost something? I should have known it wouldn't end with silence. Daniel was never the kind to lose gracefully. A week after the ceasefire, I came home to find my mailbox open and papers scattered on the floor of the hallway. At first, I thought it was random. Maybe kids, maybe wind. But then I saw what had been torn open. My therapist's appointment slips. A copy of the ER visit bill from 2 years ago. Even a few old prescription stubs I hadn't touched in months. He hadn't just gone digging. He'd gotten into my private medical records. Somehow. And that wasn't all. A neighbor from 2 floors down, Mrs. Garcia, approached me that evening, wringing her hands. Your brother, she said, voice hesitant. He was here last night. He asked some strange questions. If I'd heard noises from your apartment. If I'd seen anyone coming or going. He said he was worried about your mental state. I felt like my bones had gone hollow. He was still trying to build a case, only this time from the shadows, planting doubt, quietly poisoning the well, so that if anything happened later, if I so much as raised my voice, he could say, see, look what I was dealing with. It was petty, desperate, and deeply strategic. I didn't respond, not publicly. Instead, I installed a second camera inside my apartment, facing the front door. I checked my credit report and placed fraud alerts on all 3 bureaus. I had my therapist note in her files that I had reason to believe someone was attempting to misuse my medical history. And then I did one more thing. I sent Daniel a handwritten note. Just one sentence. You're not invisible. You're just predictable. No return address.
No signature.
I didn't need to leave one. After that, he stopped. At least for a while. But trust, true trust, was gone. And I knew I'd never get it back. Not with him. Not completely with anyone. I had a choice. I could press charges. I had enough. Unlawful access to private information, attempts at coercion, defamation, and what Gwen referred to as soft fraud. Using legal systems to manipulate inheritance structures. It would mean court, media, a drawn-out war that would hollow us both out. Or I could walk away. Not forgive. Not forget. Just withdraw. Let him stew in the silence, knowing he'd failed. Knowing that he'd tried to break me and ended up cornering himself. I chose the second path. Not because it was noble, because I was tired. There's a kind of exhaustion that comes after a prolonged fight. The kind that seeps into your bones and tells you, you've already lost enough time, don't lose your peace too. And after everything, I wanted peace more than justice. So I filed a formal letter with the family attorney, declining any further involvement in the administration of the estate, citing personal boundaries. I requested that all communication with Daniel go through my lawyer. I moved out of the apartment even though I'd won it. I sold it within a month. With the proceeds, I bought something small on the edge of a lake town where no one knew my name. Just a one-bedroom cottage with creaky floorboards, lots of windows, and no family ghosts. Dad passed peacefully 6 months later, in the care home Daniel had chosen. I didn't go to the funeral, not because I wasn't grieving, but because Daniel turned it into a press moment. A slideshow, a tribute to the brother who carried it all. He even gave a eulogy. I heard he cried. I didn't speak to Daniel for over a year after the funeral. Every few months, I'd get a vague update from Uncle Mark, mostly about the estate, sometimes about Daniel's business. Apparently, things weren't going well. A few bad investments. An audit. Whispers that one of his clients had turned on him and accused him of ethical violations. Karma's patient, I've learned. As for me, I started to rebuild. I took freelance work. I began attending group therapy in the next town over, not for mental illness, but for sibling estrangement. It was odd, sitting in a circle with people who'd survived the same kind of intimate betrayal. One man hadn't spoken to his sister since the day their mother's ring went missing. A woman with a laugh too big for her body confessed she still stalked her brother's Facebook just to make sure he hadn't erased her completely. We weren't there to forgive. We were there to breathe. The cottage became my sanctuary. I learned how to fix my own plumbing. I built raised garden beds. I stopped checking the locks every night. Sometimes, I even slept through until morning without dreaming of lawyers or courtrooms. But healing's not a straight line. One night, I woke up from a dream where Daniel and I were children again, hiding under the table during a thunderstorm, whispering about monsters. When I opened my eyes, I cried. Not because I missed him, but because, for a second, I did. I sent him one message that spring. Just a line. You know what you did. That doesn't disappear. He never replied. But I saw the read receipt. And that was enough. If you told me 2 years ago that my own brother would try to declare me mentally unfit, I would have laughed. Not because we were so close, but because I thought there were rules. Invisible lines even the worst people wouldn't cross. I was wrong. Families don't fall apart all at once. They unravel slowly, thread by thread, excuse by excuse, until one day you're holding a pile of tangled string, wondering why it hurts to look at it. What I've learned is this. Just because someone shares your blood doesn't mean they share your values. And loyalty without boundaries is just a slow form of self-erasure. Daniel wasn't always this way. Or maybe he was, and I didn't want to see it. Either way, when money entered the picture and fear and control, it exposed the hairline fractures in our relationship and made them chasms. And once someone tries to rewrite your sanity for their gain, there's no going back. I don't trust easily anymore. That's the cost. But I also don't doubt myself the way I used to. That's the reward. The biggest surprise? I don't hate him. Hating him would make him the center of my story, and I've worked too hard to reclaim it. People think betrayal is loud. A slammed door, a shouting match, some dramatic courtroom scene. But it's usually quiet. It's a carefully worded email, a lawyer's letter, a manipulated voicemail, a family dinner where no one looks you in the eye. That's what makes it so disorienting. You expect the knife to come from strangers, not from someone who once split a cookie with you on the kitchen floor. If you're reading this and something in your life feels off, really off, don't ignore that gut feeling. The people who try to convince you you're overreacting are usually the ones who benefit from your silence. Document everything. Tell someone you trust, even if it's just one person. Keep copies, save screenshots, write things down when they happen. When the line between truth and fiction starts to blur, Your memory is your best defense. And if it ever comes down to your word versus theirs, make sure your word has receipts. Most of all, pick your battles. Not every injustice is worth burning your life down over. Sometimes walking away is the braver thing, the more strategic thing. Peace is not surrender, it's a choice. I didn't get revenge in the dramatic, cinematic sense. No public takedown, no court victory speech. I didn't need it. I got something better. I got my story back. And sometimes that's the only justice you need.